Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The heavy, cream-colored check hit the polished marble floor with a sound that was softer than a whisper, yet it echoed like a gunshot in the silent, cavernous drawing room. "Pick it up," the woman said, her voice dripping with the kind of disdain that only old money could cultivate. She took a sip of her tea, not bothering to look at the young man standing before her. "That is 50 million won. It is more than you or your entire lineage will see in a lifetime. Take it, abort the creature, and disappear. You are too poor, too dirty, and too common to carry a thorn heir." Valen stood frozen, his hands trembling, not from greed, but from a humiliation that burned hot behind his eyes. He looked down at his worn sneakers, stained with mud, and the faint chemical smell of the veterinary clinic where he worked, contrasting violently with the pristine opulence of the Thorn estate. He was an omega from the slums, a nobody who scraped by on scholarships and instant noodles. Standing before Lady Beatrice Thorn, the matriarch of the city's most powerful conglomerate, he felt like an insect about to be crushed. "I didn't ask for this," Valen whispered, his hand instinctively going to his flat stomach. "And we didn't ask for you," Beatrice snapped, finally setting her cup down with a sharp clatter. "My son made a mistake. A momentary lapse in judgment fueled by gratitude. You saved a dog. That does not qualify you to birth the next CEO of Thorn Industries." The double doors at the far end of the room swung open. The air pressure in the room seemed to drop, the temperature plummeting as a tall, broad-shouldered figure strode in. Julian Thorn, the Viper of Soul. He wore a charcoal three-piece suit that cost more than Valen's childhood home. His raven hair swept back from a face that was devastatingly handsome and terrifyingly cold. "Mother," Julian's voice was a low baritone that vibrated through the floorboards. "I believe I told you not to speak to him." "I am handling your mess, Julian," Beatrice hissed, standing up. "He is a pauper, a street rat. Look at him. He is unfit." Julian didn't look at his mother. He walked straight to Valen, his obsidian eyes scanning the trembling omega from head to toe. He stopped inches away, his towering height casting a shadow over Valen. For a moment, Valen thought Julian would agree with her. Julian had always been cold, distant, a man made of ice and calculation. But then, Julian slowly knelt. The entire room went silent. The Viper kneeling? Julian reached out, his large, calloused hand brushing a stray lock of hair from Valen's forehead, his thumb resting gently on Valen's cheekbone. "Are you hurt?" "No," Valen breathed, his heart hammering against his ribs. Julian turned his head slightly, locking eyes with his mother while staying on one knee before Valen. "He is not poor, mother. He carries my life in his body. And if you ever raise your voice at him again, I will dismantle your portfolio piece by piece until you are the one begging for change on the street." To understand how the world's coldest billionaire ended up kneeling on the floor for a penniless veterinary student, one must rewind 3 months to a night where the sky had opened up to drown the city. It was a torrential downpour, the kind that turned the gutters of District 9 into raging rivers. Valen was closing up the small, underfunded community vet clinic. He was exhausted. Double shifts were the only way to pay for his omega suppressants and his grandmother's nursing home fees. He was locking the grate when the screech of tires tore through the storm. A sleek, black luxury sedan, smoke pouring from its hood, had skidded off the wet asphalt and slammed into a streetlight just yards away. Valen didn't think. He ran. He expected to find a drunk driver. Instead, he found the passenger door flung open and a man stumbling out into the rain. The man was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, his expensive suit soaked instantly. But he wasn't checking his own injuries. He was frantically trying to pull something out of the back seat. "Help him," the man roared, his voice cracking with a desperation that sounded wrong coming from someone who looked so powerful. "You have to help him." Valen rushed forward, pushing past the man to see inside. Lying on the fine leather seats, whimpering softly, was a massive cane corso. The dog was pinned by a piece of crumpled metal from the door frame, a deep gash in its side. "I'm a vet tech," Valen shouted over the thunder. "Move." Most people in the city saw animals as accessories or nuisances. But Valen saw souls. He worked with a precision that bordered on terrifying. He ordered the man, Julian Thorne, though Valen didn't know it yet, to hold the flashlight. He used a crowbar from the trunk to leverage the metal off the dog's leg. He's losing blood. I need to operate now. My clinic is right there, Valen commanded. For the next 4 hours, the social hierarchy of the world was suspended. Inside the sterile, flickering light of the operating room, Julian Thorne was not a CEO. He was just a terrified owner, pacing the floor, his blood-stained hands shaking. Valen was the authority. He stitched, he transfused, and he monitored vitals with a calm focus. When Valen finally stepped out, pulling off his surgical mask, Julian looked up with eyes that were haunted. He'll live, Valen said softly. The artery was missed by a millimeter. He's a fighter. Julian let out a breath that seemed to carry the weight of the world. He walked over to the glass, looking at the sleeping giant of a dog. Atlas. His name is Atlas. He is all I have. It was a strange admission for a man wearing a Patek Philippe watch. Valen sensed a profound loneliness in him, a jagged hole that the dog filled. He's a good boy, Valen said, wiping his hands on a rag. But the surgery, the supplies, it's going to be expensive. I can work out a payment plan. Julian turned to look at Valen. For the first time, he really saw him. He saw the frayed cuffs of Valen's scrubbed top, the tired shadows under his amber eyes, the defiance in his posture despite his poverty. I don't do payment plans, Julian said, his voice regaining its icy edge, though his eyes remained curious. He pulled a black card from his wet jacket and placed it on the counter. Charge whatever you want. And keep the card. I can't. Take it, Julian commanded. You saved the only thing I care about. Consider it a down payment. A down payment for what? Julian stepped closer, the scent of rain and expensive musk overwhelming Valen's senses. I need someone I can trust with a life. You have steady hands, little doctor. And I have a proposition. The proposition was a contract marriage. It was the most cliché, ridiculous thing Valen had ever heard, something out of the soap operas his grandmother watched. But Julian Thorne was deadly serious. The Thorne board of directors was threatening to oust Julian if he didn't produce an heir within the year. His uncle was circling like a shark. Julian needed a child, but he despised the socialite omegas his mother threw at him. Vapid, scheming creatures who only wanted his money. You are practical, Julian had said, sitting in Valen's tiny, peeling kitchen a week later. You are compassionate. You are irrelevant in my social circles, which means you have no political agenda. I will pay off your grandmother's medical bills for the next 10 years. I will pay your tuition. In exchange, you will carry my heir. I'm not a broodmare, Valen had spat back. No, Julian agreed coolly. You are a business partner. A surrogate. You will live in my house. You will have the best medical care. Once the child is born, you will be given a settlement of $10 million, and you can leave. Or stay. It is up to you. Valen should have thrown his coffee in Julian's face. But then his phone buzzed. A notification from the nursing home. Asterisk payment overdue. Final notice, asterisk. Valen looked at Julian. He looked at the checkbook on the table. He signed. Living in the Thorne mansion was like living in a mausoleum. It was cold, silent, and beautifully dead. Valen was given the east wing. Julian stayed in the west. They met only for meals, which were eaten in silence at a table long enough to land a plane on. The process of conception had been clinical. Artificial insemination. No touch. No intimacy. Julian was a man of his word. This was a transaction. But as the weeks turned into months, and Valen's body began to change, the dynamic shifted in subtle, terrifying ways. It started with Atlas. The dog, fully recovered, adored Valen. Wherever Valen went, the massive black beast followed, acting as a bodyguard. Julian would often come home late to find Valen asleep on the rug in the library, Atlas's head resting on Valen's stomach. Julian would stand in the doorway, watching them. The staff whispered that the master had stopped working weekends, that he was ordering the chefs to prepare specific foods, spicy soups, tart fruits, that Valen craved. One evening, during a violent thunderstorm, Valen found himself panicked. The thunder reminded him of the night his parents died in a car crash. He was curling into a ball in the corner of his room, hyperventilating. The door opened. Julian entered, not with the stride of a CEO, but with the urgency of a protector. He didn't ask questions. He He simply sat on the floor next to Valen and pulled him into his arms. "Breathe," Julian commanded, his hand rubbing circles on Valen's back. "I have you. The walls are thick. Nothing can get in." "It's loud," Valen gasped, burying his face in Julian's chest. "Focus on my voice," Julian murmured, his lips brushing the top of Valen's hair. He began to talk, not about business, but about Atlas. About how he found the dog as a starving puppy. About how the dog was the only living thing that didn't ask him for money. Valen fell asleep in his arms. When he woke up the next morning, he was tucked into his bed, and Julian was gone. But on the nightstand, there was a pair of noise-canceling headphones and a note, for next time. That was the slow burn. The agonizing, quiet accumulation of small kindnesses. Julian defending Valen from a rude waiter. Julian firing a maid who made a snide comment about Valen's clothes. Julian reading books on prenatal care, marking pages with sticky notes. Valen realized with a sinking heart that he was breaking the one rule of the contract: do not fall in love. But Lady Beatrice had noticed, too. She saw her son's icy armor melting. She saw the way Julian looked at Valen when he thought no one was watching, with a hunger that wasn't just about the air. She decided to intervene, which brought them back to the present moment. The drawing room. The check on the floor. Julian on his knees. "Get up," Lady Beatrice screeched, her face turning a blotchy red. "Have you lost your mind?" Kneeling to him, Julian stood up slowly. The tenderness he had shown Valen vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp rage directed entirely at his mother. "You tried to buy him off," Julian said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You tried to send my heir, my family, into the gutter. I am trying to save this family," Beatrice yelled. "He is a leech. He trapped you with that dog, and now he saved Atlas when no one else would stop." Julian cut her off. "He saved me from becoming a man who only cares about stock prices. And unlike you, Mother, he has never asked me for a dime." Julian turned to Valen. "Did you take the money?" Valen shook his head. "I told her to go to hell." A flicker of a smile touched Julian's lips. It was a rare, beautiful thing. "Good." Julian turned back to his mother. "You are no longer welcome in this house. Security will escort you out. Your access to the family accounts has been frozen pending an audit. I know about the funds you've been siphoning to your brother's casino." Beatrice went pale. You wouldn't." "I would. And I have." Julian gestured to the door. "Get out." As Beatrice was dragged out, screaming curses, silence descended on the room once more. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was relieved. Julian turned to Valen. The adrenaline faded, leaving Valen feeling lightheaded. He swayed. Julian caught him instantly, scooping him up into his arms bridal style. "I can walk," Valen protested weakly. "You can, but you won't," Julian said, carrying him toward the grand staircase. Atlas trotted happily behind them, his tail wagging. They reached the master bedroom, Julian's room. Julian laid Valen down on the massive bed, kicking off his shoes. He sat on the edge of the mattress, looking at Valen with an intensity that made Valen's breath hitch. "The contract," Valen whispered, looking away. "It says I have to leave after the baby is born. That check. 50 million. It would have solved everything." "Burn the contract," Julian said. Valen looked up, startled. "What?" "I had my lawyers draft a new one this morning," Julian said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a folded document. "But this one isn't about an heir. And it has no exit clause." He handed it to Valen. Valen's eyes scanned the legal jargon, but certain words jumped out. Asterisk co-ownership of assets. Full partner. Marriage. Asterisk. "Why?" Valen asked, his voice trembling. "Because of the baby? Because I have good genetics?" "Because," Julian said, leaning in until their foreheads touched, "when I walked in and saw her attacking you, I didn't care about the heir. I didn't care about the company. I just wanted to burn the world down for hurting you." Julian took Valen's hand and placed it over his own heart. It was beating fast, a frantic rhythm against the calm exterior. "You saved my dog, Valen. Then you saved me. I was poor until I met you. I had money, but I had nothing. You are the only wealth I want." Valen looked at the man who was supposed to be his enemy, his boss, his tormentor. He saw only the man who held him through the thunderstorms. "I'm expensive to keep," Valen teased, tears spilling down his cheeks. I require spicy soup at 3 a.m. and I talk to animals. Julian kissed the tears away, his lips soft and claiming. I have the resources. I think I can afford you. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf, by letting the wolf tame him first. If you enjoyed seeing Julian destroy his toxic family to protect his love, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a husband who treated you like a business transaction at the start, or would you have taken the money and run? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt, masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art. 2 men, BL, yaoi, man 1. Kneeling on one knee, wearing charcoal 3-piece expensive suit, raven black hair slicked back, sharp jawline, cold expression softening, holding the hand of man 2, dominant but tender pose. Man 2, standing, looking down, wearing oversized beige sweater and worn jeans, messy brown hair, amber eyes, hand protectively over stomach, expression of shock and vulnerability. Background is a lavish Baroque drawing room, marble floors, crystal chandelier, an older woman in background being dragged away by security, a large black cane corso dog sitting faithfully beside the kneeling man, dramatic lighting, cinematic composition, emotional atmosphere, intricate details.